Wad.
Dear Senators, I see that we have quorum. I call to order this meeting of the Standing Committee on Transport and Communications. I'm Leo Husaka, Senator from Quebec and Chair of this committee.
I invite my colleagues to briefly introduce themselves, starting from my left.
Senator Paula Simons, Alberta, Treaty 6 territory.
Naomi Farr, Ontario.
Senator Cormier, Nouveau-Brunswick.
Senator Cormier, New Brunswick.
Yeah.
Marty Klein from Saskatchewan, Treaty 4 territory.
Dennis Dawson, Quebec. Sorry about that.
Sénatrice Julie Miville-Dechaine, Québec.
Senator Selmitri, Quebec.
Sénatrice Bernadette Clément, Ontario.
Bernadette Clément, Ontario.
In Manning, Newfoundland, Labrador.
Don Platt, Landmark, Manitoba.
Pamela Wallen, Medina, Saskatchewan.
Honorable Senators, we are meeting to continue our clause-by-clause examination of Bill C-11 to amend the Broadcasting Act and to make related and consequential amendments to other acts. Once again, we are joined by officials from Canadian Heritage, Mr. Thomas Owen Ripley, Associate Assistant Deputy Minister, Amy Awad, Senior Director, Marketplace and Legislative Policy, and Mr. Yao Ahonda, Manager, Broadcasting, Marketplace and Legislative Policy. Thank you again to the officials for steadfastly being here while we do our work. Honorable colleagues, we adjourned our last meeting by standing an amendment to Clause 4, dash 4 dash 10 dash 15 is my understanding. And Sénatrice Miville-Dechaine, vous avez la parole.
You have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to read the amendment I'm tabling with my colleague, Senatrice Simons. We both worked on this amendment with our teams. So, that Bill C-11 be amended in Clause 4 on page 10 by replacing line 15 to 26 with the following. A. The extent to which a program contains a sound recording that has been assigned a unique identifier under an international standard system. B. The fact that the program has been uploaded to an online undertaking that provides a social media service by the owner or the exclusive licensee of the copyright in the sound recording or an agent of the owner. C. The fact that the program or a significant part of it has been broadcast by a broadcasting undertaking that I. is required to be carried on under a license, or II. is required to be registered with the Commission but does not provide a social media service. So, that being said, I will briefly in French explain to you part of the rationale, and Donna will follow. Oh, I said Donna. Sorry. Paula, I'm sorry. Senator Paula Simon. So, comme on le sait,
as we know, we're in one of the most controversial parts of Bill C-11. There have been many comments, many worries expressed. A reminder that the government CRTC have reminded many times that users of social media and content creators would not be targeted by Bill C-11. This has been said and repeated. Despite this, we have heard witnesses, experts say that 4.2 is too broad, its scope is too broad, and they do not trust CRTC with such discretionary power. A desire was therefore expressed throughout our hearings to the effect that we would circumscribe the kind of content the CRTC could regulate on the platforms. As well, we heard that the main target, which is the aim of 4.2, is the professional content and not amateur content, specifically musical content, self-produced or produced by video clips and by music houses. This is 4.2 on the appropriate target. That is professional music only, without unduly restricting the leeway of the CRTC. And similarly, these changes would concentrate 4.2 on professional music that is downloaded by licensees, and that in total or in part was done by traditional media production houses. As a result, YouTubers, amateurs of videos, or any other content not linked to professional music would not be covered by C-11.
You'll see that we've gotten rid of the very contentious clause about directly or indirectly generates revenue. So that is off the table, gone. The amendment is scoped so that it only includes exactly the people that the government says it wishes to include, the large music producers, the Warner Brothers, the Sony, and the like. It absolutely does not include social media, as is clarified in point CII. What we're hoping, is that this will allow us to reach a workable compromise, because I share Senator Manning and Senator Walland and Senator Plett's concerns about Clause 4, which, despite the protestations of everybody, clearly includes individual creators. We believe that this amendment scopes out all of those people and only includes the very biggest music producers. This is an amendment that's been arrived at in consultation with YouTube, with TikTok, but also with all sorts of independent Quebecois music producers who provided a great deal of input so that we could craft an amendment that would capture the right peoples. Ça suffit, j'espère.
And I think that's sufficient, I hope.
I'd like to say I think it's a good start. I think it's a good amendment. I support the amendment. I think it provides some greater certainty to small online creators and individual creators. So I certainly think any amendment of this nature is welcome from my perspective. Senator Cormier.
Merci. En fait,
Thank you. I understand that the target is recording and music recordings. However, if this is more restrictive, what was it previously? And I'd like to hear Mr. Rieplin on this, because what happens with audio visuals? This is a system that is in transition. It's a system where we want to provide sufficient leeway to make sure that, let's say, a film is downloaded on TikTok and there is commercial scope to it. What happens to that sector if we only target a sound recording? That is my question for you. And what is the impact of interpreting this amendment on the Act? I would like to hear Mr. Whipley speak to this. In fact, both of you. Well, Clause C covers this, because when you're speaking about the portion C, rather, if you're speaking about a film, let's say the film will have been broadcast elsewhere. Among the criteria, of which there are 3, we could expect that even, let's say, it's a hockey program, for instance, that has been broadcast on social media, it would be broadcast elsewhere through a broadcaster. It would be sufficient criteria for this. I'll turn it over to the expert. Thank you for that question. From what I understand from the senator, if I've understood this correctly, it's not an issue of intent. That is not that all of this has to be considered cumulatively. If that is the case, I do share the same reading of the senator who tabled the amendment. Under paragraph C, this does not refer to an audio recording. Therefore, the issue of broadcasting will still cover audiovisual recordings. But I believe that this proposal consists in placing greater emphasis on music. And as we see here under A, those programs that have been downloaded that include a sound recording, in my mind, this signifies that emphasis is being placed on music.
Well, it comes down, sorry, Chair, it comes down to users out, platforms in. You know, if we don't believe that, it becomes a problem. It's a hard debate to continue. But the reality is that the bill draws a distinction between the users of social media and the platforms themselves. The intention is to exclude individual users from regulation. So that's if you don't believe that, and I guess I can't convince you of anything else. The CRTC has testified that it has no intention to regulate individual content. The government has also been clear that the legislation does not create obligations for social media creators, only for platforms well within with a limited exception for commercial content. The proposed amendment would create loopholes. And I'm repeating what Senator Gold said on earlier amendments today. The amendment would create loopholes for social media platforms to avoid contributing to Canadian culture, which, as you know, is the objective of the bill. The reality is that there are times when social media platforms act exactly like broadcasters. There are also instances where commercial content is uploaded by the owner of exclusive licenses. That's what we're really concerned about. It creates incentives for companies to share music on a platform like YouTube instead of music services like Spotify and Apple Music. This section was written the way it was to allow the flexibility to the system, to ensure that all players who are acting as broadcasters are benefiting from the culture and contributing to its sustainability. The government has been very clear about the kind of content this section is targeting. Commercial content like full movies, TV shows, and songs. I guess if you don't believe that, that's nothing we can do about trying to convince you, but that is what the government is proposing.
Thank you, Senator Dawson, Senator Wallen, and then Senator Simons.
Just, and I really appreciate that with Section A gone, directly or indirectly generates revenues, because that has been a very strong talking point on the part of the government, and they felt that was an important impact of this legislation. It was deliberate. It's still sitting there. So to Mr. Ripley, if the amendment is accepted, does that apply? Have we once and for all gotten rid of directly and indirectly generates revenues in all parts of this bill?
Thank you, Senator. I can do a check, but my recollection is this is the section of the bill that uses that.
It's the only place where it's referenced. Okay, thank you for that. We will do the check too. But yeah.
Senator Simons.
To say briefly in response to Senator Dawson's concern, I think if you read our amendment, it specifically includes exactly what you were worried about. Section B, the fact that the program has been uploaded to an online undertaking that provides a social media service by the owner or the exclusive licensee of the copyright in the sound recording or an agent of the owner. We've been very surgical with this amendment. This does not eliminate all of 4.2. It scopes it so that it actually does what the government has told us that it wants to do. It makes it very clear that social media users are not included. And I know, Senator Dawson, you would like us to take the government at its word, but it is that clause about directly or indirectly generates revenue that has concerned so many people. Further, the issue is not that we think individual TikTok makers or YouTube makers are going to be asked to contribute to the system. The question was one of whether they would be captured by discoverability. And this amendment, I believe, limits the degree to which those kinds of users are going to be captured by a discoverability paradigm. And so, in the interests of brevity, I shall now tais myself. Tais-toi, Paula.
Colleagues, question? It is moved by the Honourable Senator Melville-Duchesne that c'est proposé par la sénatrice Melville-Duchesne que le projet...
Moved by Honourable Senator Melville amended at line 15.
Is it your pleasure, honourable senators, to adopt the motion? I think the "we" has it. So carried on division. Can they distribute it? I'll have it. Colleagues, there's an amendment that's going to be distributed. It had reached the clerk but did not make the bundle. It's one amendment that was sent to the clerk but was not included in the bundle you have. And it is Clause 4, page 10-4-10-14, and it's an amendment from Senator Manning. It's being distributed as we speak.
Yes. But we're still in the middle of that.
Well, we're in that clause, and if it works or doesn't work, that's for the debate to determine. Yes, you have the floor, Senator Manning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move an amendment that Bill C-11 be amended in Clause 4 on page 10 by replacing line 14 with the following. Mission shall consider the totality, with that totality being determinative and with each factor being accounted for of the following matters. The amendment I am proposing, I do believe, will strengthen the amendment that we just passed a few moments ago. And it will strengthen it by adding the existing words and add certainty for everyone involved, the creators, the platforms, and the regulator. When concerns were raised about user-generated content being captured by this legislation, even if as an unintended consequence, Minister Rodriguez, when he appeared before our committee, referred several times to the criteria that must be considered as a safeguard against this. When he appeared before our committee, the Minister specifically stated, and I quote, "We listened to the social media creators, we listened to them, we understood their concerns, and we brought it back, with the exception of 4.2, which catches only commercial content with the 3 criteria. That's it," unquote. The wording I'm putting forward thus makes very clear that the Commission will consider these criteria to be determinative. In other words, it is intended to only catch commercial content using the 3 criteria. And it also makes clear that all 3 criteria need to be considered together. That it is not a question of picking and choosing. I do believe this captures what the Minister said repeatedly, and I do believe that it adds strength to the amendment that we just passed. So I look for your support.
Manning, Senatrice Méville-Duchesne.
Very briefly, it seems to me that this amendment runs counter to what we explained just a few moments ago. That is specifically, the CRTC must have enough leeway to apply one or other criteria depending on what is before us. And since this does not only include professional music while this dominates, the idea of saying that these 3 criteria must apply, from what I understand it in the French, I think that is a strong arming tactic we do not wish to impose.
Equally brief in supporting this amendment by Senator Manning. As I have said and others throughout this debate, it's all about individual content creators, and as much as I'd love to take the word of Senator Dawson and officials and the minister that platforms are in and digital content providers are out, we've heard way too much contradictory testimony and an unwillingness to be as categorical as that. And at the end of the day, when I hear the argument from the sponsor of the bill, which is well-intentioned when he says, well, we want platform creators to pay their fair share and all the rest of it, but I've said many, many, many times, platforms like TikTok and YouTube are non-existent if it isn't for the digital independent content providers. They're an empty shell. And at the end of the day, whatever the CRTC imposes on those standalone platforms, invariably, that regulation and those challenges and those costs and all the rest of it will be passed down to those individual content producers. That's the way of the digital world. So I supported Senator Méville-Duchesne and Senator Simon's amendment, which, like I said, is a good start and a good step. I find this amendment goes a step further in defense of those content creators. Senator Quinn.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to support that, what you just said, because we are here today. It's about the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years and how it will be interpreted. So I would endorse exactly what you said in terms of needing to have the clarity to ensure that those folks who the government today says are out are indeed out.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Senator Méville-Duchesne, why do you think this is contradictory? I don't see the contradiction. It says here, may make regulations in the original, and this goes on to say, the mission shall consider all of the things that you just laid out and which was passed by the committee. Like, that's what this thing says, which is they must listen to this.
Our amendment starts by the sentence, I'm sorry, I'm looking for my amendment. Wait. Sorry, I have too many papers.
You start on line 14 or something.
So before this line, what it says is, in making regulations under subsection, the Commission shall consider the following matters. This is what stands now as the preamble.
The paragraph above it.
Yes. So
it says, for the purposes of this paragraph, the Commission, and then it creates more options, may make regulations prescribing, et cetera, and to the point which has been expressed repeatedly by witnesses in front of this committee and members of this committee, clarity is what we're all seeking, and this says shall consider all of the things that we all just voted and agreed on.
Yes.
So it's shall rather than may, so it makes sure that this will be recognized.
I understand what I'm saying to you, and I think I still stand by what I was saying. Shall constrict the government. It gives the CRTC,
Shall, yeah. It's in here.
Shall. Okay. Je vais répondre en français.
I will answer in French. What I'm trying to say is that the way that this is written, at least in French, means that one has to take into account all of the criteria following, and the translation is not very good, and each criteria, at least in French, must be considered.
Donc, oui, c'est un peu mal traduit.
The translation is quite poor, this amendment, but to say that from my viewpoint, and again, we might not share the same viewpoint, the amendment you're bringing removes flexibility from the CRTC to establish which are the determining criteria. That is my interpretation.
So I'm sorry, are you saying that the translation of Senator Manning's
It's difficult to...
motion is not clear to you, or what? I don't understand what translation you're talking.
This one, yeah. The translation here, for me, is not particularly good. But what I'm saying, if I take it even in English, I think this clause gives less flexibility to the CRTC than what we have.
That's the point, yeah.
That's the point.
I know, but I'm against that.
Lost in the translation.
So,
I'm sorry, I think it's a translation.
I think the question from Senator Wallen, and I'll ask the supplemental question, is that this amendment actually strengthens your amendment, because your amendment is a lot less prescriptive to the CRTC. This makes it clear to the CRTC what the directives are.
Well, don't tell me what my amendment means.
No, I'm interpreting, I'm allowed to interpret what both amendments mean. I'm asking you the question.
What
Do
I'm
you agree or
saying is that
disagree? And you have the right to disagree.
What we've done is taken out of this portion, ce qu'on a enlevé, c'est tout ce qui touchait à la génération.
We removed everything having to do with revenue generation. We believe that this criterion was not significant to the extent that many content creators achieve revenue. So we removed this criteria, and what we are saying is that the CRTC will assess these different criteria, and that's what we see here. The Commission takes into account the following criteria, but it gives it sufficient latitude to do so. And that is how, personally, I interpret this series of criteria.
Mr. Ripley could speak to this, because to me, I don't understand if this means that they would have to consider every criteria equally. I mean, can you interpret for us, in the best sense, what this amendment would actually do? And can you comment on whether the French translation does the same thing as the English?
Thank you, Senator, through the chair. So if I understand what Senator Manning is seeking to do, it is to essentially render the three criteria cumulative. So the content that would be scoped in under any regulation made under 4.2 would have to hit all three criteria. That's my understanding of what Senator Manning is seeking to do through this. And based on the conversation that took place on the floor when the previous amendment was tabled, my understanding, based on the answer that Senatress Miville-Deschênes gave to Senator Cormier, is that it was not intended that necessarily all three factors needed to be considered in a cumulative fashion.
It won't fit. I mean, you know, if something that might be rebroadcast, a rebroadcast football game is not going to have a unique identifier of music. So, all right, now that I understand, I appreciate the sentiment, but I don't think it works.
Senator Flett.
Well, actually, this is just an observation more than anything else, and very short. Yesterday we discussed discoverability, and Senator Manning had an amendment that I think was very close to the amendment he's making today, that exchanged the word ensure to allow, and then the same people that are now saying we're being too prescriptive, yesterday we weren't being prescriptive enough when we said allow. I think there's a fair bit of inconsistency in some of these arguments, Chair.
No,
Nope.
I
I have Senator Wu, Senator Wallen, and Senator Gold, and then if we're done, we'll go to the question. Senator Wu.
I don't see the difference between shall consider the following matters and shall consider the totality, etc., etc. Even if you were to argue that using the word totality and all those other words in between suggests considering the cumulative effect of all the factors, it's impossible to determine whether, in fact, there was a cumulative calculation. The fact of the matter is that the current version as amended already requires, through the use of the word shall, to consider all the factors. We will not know what weighting the CRTC places on each of the factors, but they have to, based on the amended version, they have to consider all those factors. And to that extent, totality is already covered. To my mind, this is superfluous and possibly an example of inelegant legal drafting.
Senator Wallen.
Okay, so what we're talking about is 4.2, bracket 1. For the purposes of this paragraph, which is not in any way changed by the amendment starts after that. Is that not correct? Yes. Yeah. So the paragraph in question is, for the purposes of paragraph 4.1, blah, blah, the Commission may make may make regulations prescribing programs in respect, etc.
It's the next clause. It's not amending that clause.
I know, oh, it's not dealing with that one. Okay, well, okay, I've got that. So then I just want to go back to Mr. Ripley. When it says mission shall consider the totality with that totality being determinative with each factor being accounted for. So you don't see that as in each factor being accounted for, meaning A, B, C, 1 and 2.
Thank you, Senator Wallen. Know that based on how Senator Manning presented his amendment, that's what I understand him to be seeking to achieve, is that the CRTC, in making regulations under section 4.2, would have to look and consider all three factors, and the regulations would have to have accounted for all three factors.
Senator Gold? No. Your
Question?
It is moved by the Honourable Senator Manning that Bill C-11 be amended on Clause 4, page 10, at line 14. May I dispense? Is it your pleasure, Honourable Senators, to adopt the motion in amendment? No. I think the noes have it. Recorded vote.
L'honorable sénateur Roussakos.
Yes.
L'honorable sénatrice Clément.
No.
L'honorable sénateur Cormier.
No.
L'honorable sénateur Dawson.
No.
The Honorable Senator Gold, PC.
No.
The Honorable Senator Klein.
No.
The Honorable Senator Manning. L'honorable sénatrice Miville de Chêne.
No.
The Honorable Senator Omidvar.
No.
The Honorable Senator Platt.
Yes.
The Honorable Senator Quinn.
Yes.
The Honorable Senator Simons.
No.
The Honorable Senator Wallen.
Yes.
The Honorable Senator Wu.
No.
Yeas pour, 5-5, nays contre, 9-9, abstentions, nil.
Accordingly, the amendment is defeated. Senator Wallen?
Well, I have an amendment that has been... I don't know whether you want me to withdraw it now or if we're still going in some order. I'd be next, so then...
You're withdrawing that amendment?
I'm withdrawing C-11, 10, 60, no, just a minute. 17. C-11, 410, 17.
So that's withdrawn from Senator Wallen.
Which had to do with direct or indirect revenue language, which has now been excised from the bill.
This one. Next amendment is Clause 4-10-32R. Senator Manning. Can we, all of you have it, obviously. You have the amendment, so Senator Manning, you have the floor.
No. Okay. Well, let's just try this right now. Okay. Okay, so the purpose of my amendment is to add a monetary threshold to mitigate inclusion of user-generated content, and it adds some new text. The amendment is on Clause 4 on page 10 by adding the following after line 32. The regulations shall not prescribe a program of a broadcasting undertaking that generates annual revenues of less than $25 million. Colleagues, a principal issue related to this bill is the question of to whom this legislation should apply. The government has repeatedly stated that there is no intention to regulate user-generated content and that there is no intent to apply this legislation to smaller players. Yet there are no boundaries in the legislation to ensure that this does not happen. There are no boundaries to provide the certainty that digital creators have told us that they require. We have heard from numerous witnesses who very clearly stated that the bill had to incorporate a revenue threshold in order to ensure that the legislation focuses on services that are truly of consequence in the digital marketplace. Tim Denton of the Internet Society of Canada chapter said that any online service that earns less than $150 million in Canada annually should be excluded from the Act from any regulation or obligation to contribute to Canadian content production. Mr. Denton stated that C-11 captures ordinary Canadians, while S-2-3 of the bill excludes some instances of streaming services that would otherwise be covered by the Act. These provisions, Mr. Denton argued, do not go nearly far enough in ensuring the legislation focuses on services that are truly of consequence in the digital marketplace. For instance, neither charities nor religious organisations are exempt, nor does S-2-3 shelter the online activities of individuals, whether professional or amateur. Mr. Denton said that social media platforms are far from the only places on the Internet where entities and individuals may transmit audio or audio-visual content on the Internet. Individual and community websites abound with such content. Neither S-2-3 nor S-4-1 addresses the much broader regulatory reach of C-11. Conrad von Frankenstein, a former chair of the CRTC, told our committee that vesting the Commission such large powers with such vague parameters will prove extremely onerous for the CRTC. Every single stakeholder will come forward with specific requests for exemptions of conditions and argue they fall within the vast powers given to the CRTC. I'm just going to quote one of the smaller creators that came to our committee. Justin Tomchuk, an independent filmmaker, told our committee on September 27th that Bill C-11 is currently drafted, and I quote, makes it clear that my business will fall under the call of the CRTC's directives as I derive direct and indirect income through my artistic efforts. Aubrey Roy, content creator and skateboarder, told our committee, and I quote, as a digital creator, I feel that if 4-2 goes in as it stands, then I have to look for a full-time job. It's a depressing reality for me that my content is going to be pushed aside. I've just gotten this platform. I'm not young, I'm almost 50, and I've been working really hard to get to a place where I can do something like this. I haven't done it with a lot of help. For someone else to come in, push me aside, and dictate what my audience wants to see, I can't fight that. I'm very discouraged. That's how I feel. Colleagues, I believe we have an obligation to respond to what an overwhelming number of witnesses have told us. I look forward to your support for my amendment.
Thank you, Senator Manning. Again, I think this is an essential amendment that Senator Manning is proposing. We've heard testimony nonstop, and it's been a concern of many about this bill, despite, again, the assurances of the government that it will not sweep in and overcome smaller players, generated content producers. There's no boundaries, and there's nothing in the legislation, there's no thresholds and limitations in order to eliminate the regulatory uncertainty these small, important digital creators are sensing, are feeling. And we all know from the testimony during our very long, arduous study that the Broadcasting Act does give the CRTC the powers to do essentially what they want, both with the platforms and with the content creators. I think this is a reasonable amendment, creating a very reasonable threshold and limitations that will give security and certainty to all these new digital content producers across the country. We've all, at one time or another, during this committee, spoke about this passionately in questions that we asked these individual content providers and content producers that came before, and they pleaded, as we all know, half the testimony at this committee was in regards to these Canadians who create this modern-day digital Canadian content. They're pleading for some certainty, and we are their last hope to provide those parameters. If not, colleagues, we will be leaving it exclusively wide open to the CRTC and, by extension, to Heritage Canada to determine those directives. Senator Plett and Senator Gold.
Thank you, Chair. My question for Mr. Ripley. Mr. Ripley, currently, are there any limitations in the Act related to its application to online undertakings who may have more limited revenues and paid subscriptions when compared to bigger players?
Thank you. Thank you, Senator. So the primary limitation remains the one that we discussed a couple of days ago, that the CRTC is only to regulate those undertakings where it's of the opinion that they are in a place to contribute in a material way to the policy objectives of the Act. And the second element that's relevant is a recognition that the CRTC should regulate in a way that's responsive to the nature of the undertaking, which speaks to some of the issues that you raised in your question.
Would you agree that incorporating a threshold would lessen the regulatory burden?
Thank you for the follow-up question. If Senator Manning, the drafting is a little bit ambiguous, but if Senator Manning's intention is to attach the $25 million threshold to the broadcast undertaking, if that's the intention, not the attachment to the program, because I believe the amendment could actually be read both ways, but if the intention is to attach the threshold to the undertaking, what that would mean is that the CRTC could only scope in content on social media platforms where the social media platform earned or generated revenues over $25 million. And so it would be clear that if you had a small social media platform generating less than that, there would never be a situation where content uploaded to that social media platform, even if it met the factors at 4.2, would be included.
I guess you need to make a determination whether incorporating a threshold would lessen the regulatory burden. Regardless of what Senator Manning is intending, there's something going to be written into this legislation. Has your department received correspondence, or have you had concerns expressed to you by smaller online undertakings concerned that the bill may apply to them? Our committee certainly has received numerous evidence on this matter, and if you have, how many smaller online undertakings have expressed concern to your department in this matter?
With respect to this section of the bill, I would say the greatest source of concern has been from social media creators. Having said that, I believe there is still a degree of confusion in terms of understanding that a social media creator, an individual uploading their content to a social media platform, there is no question of them being considered a broadcasting undertaking under this bill, and that's because of the previous Section 2, subparagraph 2.1 that we've looked at. So the question at 4.2 is, what is the content uploaded to a social media service that is scoped in with respect to the Act? But the obligations are on the social media service. There is not a question of those obligations being placed on social media creators. Social media creators have also expressed the concern about the impact of YouTube being asked to contribute and the impact that may have on their business model. But that these are two. I would say these are two separate concerns, and I want to be very clear that there's no with respect to the former concern, there's no question of them being considered a broadcasting undertaking, no matter how much money they make as a YouTuber, for example.
Senator Gold.
Well, I'm trying to, I will honor your request to be brief. The government opposes this amendment. I think we're ready for the question.
It is moved by the Honourable Senator Manning that Bill C-11 be amended on Clause 4, page 10, at line 32. Is it your pleasure, Honourable Senators, to adopt the motion in amendment? No. I think the noes have it. A recorded vote requested by Senator Manning.
L'honorable sénateur Oussakos.
Yes.
L'honorable sénatrice Clément.
Non.
L'honorable sénateur Cormier.
No.
L'honorable sénateur Dawson. No. The Honorable Senator Gold PC.
He's abstaining to go.
Oh, I beg your pardon. No, I'm not abstaining. I am saying no, and I apologize for getting distracted. Thank you, colleagues, for saving me from that embarrassment.
The Honorable Senator Klein.
No.
The Honorable Senator Manning. L'honorable sénatrice Méville de Chêne.
No.
The Honorable Senator Omidvar.
No.
The Honorable Senator Plett.
Yes.
The Honorable Senator Quinn.
No.
The Honorable Senator Simons.
No.
The Honorable Senator Wallen.
No.
The Honorable Senator Wu. Yeas pour, 3, nays contre, 11, 11, abstention, abstentions, nil.
Accordingly, the amendment is defeated. And we move on to Clause 5.
Comment ça?
Who would have thought?
Wow. So now we're at shall clause 4 as amended.
Honorable colleague, shall Clause 4 as amended carry? Carried on division.
Thank you.
So colleagues, moving right along, getting into Clause 5. So Bill C-11, Clause 5-11-22.
Yes, I will be presenting this amendment on behalf of my colleague, Senator Dasko. I'll be very quick. This just adds the word innovation, as Senator Dasko had added it earlier on, to unanimous consent. So, question?
Yeah.
I guess, if no one has any questions.
I'm just trying to find it.
Okay, it's just
Page
a clause that
11.
is added. Yeah.
Senator, did she read it in the records?
After line 22.
Senator Simons, can you read the amendment?
Sure.
In its entirety?
The amendment would add, it's new language, it would create a paragraph 5.2c to say, C, promotes innovation and is readily adaptable to scientific and technological change. This is language that mirrors Senator Dasko's amendment, which we passed last week.
Can you just remind us quickly the objective, overall objective?
The overall objective was to put the word innovation in, which did not exist elsewhere in the bill, and to emphasize the importance of technological change at a time when these platforms are evolving and sprouting up so quickly.
Senator Manning.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I support this amendment. The internet is, as we all know, is very dynamic. It should not be regulated without taking the importance of innovation into account. And when you look through the entirety of the bill before us, there are very few references to the innovation at all. So this gives an opportunity to put that in there. And the amendment at least acknowledges that, even if the bill itself runs counter to innovation in many ways. But no, I support the amendment. Thank you, Mr.
Quinn.
Thank you, Chair, and I thank my colleagues for their commentary because I agree with your commentary. I'm only questioning what the rationale is for the word scientific. Technological change is technological change. When you talk about scientific change, that means something different. I believe.
It's not my language, and I hesitate to speak for Senator Dasko. I know her overall intent was to add to the bill a sense of urgency about embracing innovation and technological change. I don't think that the word scientific there is doing any harm. I mean, scientific, I don't know. I mean, what do you call a scientific versus a technological change if we're talking about artificial intelligence, for example?
I understand that, and I guess we all have different backgrounds, but I agree 100% with the innovation and technological change. I'm stumbling over scientific, which has a different meaning in my world. But I'm not gonna cause a. I just wanted to ask that question. I am not going to introduce a sub-amendment.
Thank
I
you.
agree with what's here.
Thank you. Question?
Question.
What is the original paragraph 5?
There isn't an original. This is the.
It's a new one.
This is an add-on.
Thank you.
Question? It is moved by the Honourable Senator Simons on behalf of Senator Dasko that Bill C-11 be amended on Clause 5, page 11 at line 22. May I dispense? Is it your pleasure, Honourable Senators, to adopt the motion in amendment? Amendment passes on division. Thank you, colleagues. And thank you for your patience. The chair is a little bit tired tonight. So, colleagues, we're moving on. C-11-5, claim clause 5-1136A, and that's Senator Dawson, the sponsor of the bill. Vous avez la parole, Senator.
Senator Plett, since I'm going to be talking about you, I wanted to be sure that I don't often agree with you, but you have mentioned a few times, why didn't the government do it before? It's never too late to do well. So on the privacy issue, we will be amending and creating an amendment that deals with the issue based on the testimony that the Privacy Commissioner did in front of us. I know you've mentioned that in the past. Why not before? Well, that's why we have a Senate. It's to do a sober second thought, and tonight I'm going to be presenting a motion that goes in that direction. Des questions relatives à la protection de la vie privée.
Questions regarding privacy were raised throughout all of our study, specifically the Privacy Commissioner. The reality is that broadcast services, streaming services, required a lot of private data.
These services run through smart TVs and other intermediaries that collect vast amounts of personal information from Canadians in order to provide relevant content and better target advertising. Certains services recueillent et regroupent.
Some services bring together vision at a certain data, and we need to speak about privacy protection as part of the Broadcasting Act. So, as part of this entry into the 21st century, we're trying to do this.
Where they will be the most effective. L'article 5 de la loi sur la radiodiffusion précise les facteurs que le CRTC doit intégrer.
Section 5 indicates that these clauses should be included. By adding this clause 5, CRTC will provide privacy protection and will turn this into an explicit objective of the broadcasting sector.
CRTC regulates in a way that protects Canadians from threats to their privacy and misuse of their data when they stream online content. This would result in stronger privacy protection for consumers when compared to adding privacy language to Section 2 of the Act, which we did. And as adding language to the interpretation section of the Act would ensure privacy protection only as it relates to the operation of the CRTC itself. La question de la protection de la vie privée est une question que le gouvernement...
The issue of privacy protection is taken very seriously by the government. I believe there's consensus in the committee with respect to integrating language aimed at protecting the privacy of Canadians online in broadcasting. This is why I'm pleased to bring forward the amendment as presented here under Clause 5, page 11, to add to lines 36 to 88 the following. Protects the privacy of individuals who are members of the audience for programs broadcast by broadcasting undertakings.
C-11 be amended in Clause 5 on page 11 by replacing lines 36 to 38 with the following: ing, out, and, at the following paragraph, and by adding the following additional paragraph. G1, protects the privacy of individuals who are members of the audience for programs broadcasting by broadcasting undertakings, and. This goes in line with the testimony of the Privacy Commissioner that appeared very much at the beginning of these meetings a few months ago, I would say. For those who don't remember it, I could quote his comments, but we've been quoting a lot these days. I will pass.
Thank you, Senator Dawson, and let it not be said that this chair doesn't have an open mind, because I fully support the government's sober second thought on this. My question is, I'm glad to see the government listen carefully to the recommendation of the Privacy Commissioner, and this is a very good amendment. Why didn't the government equally listen to the testimony of so many witnesses, including former CRTC chairs, in regards to algorithm manipulation or user-generated content, making sure it's withdrawn from the various clauses, or more importantly, making sure that customer protection is at least mentioned once in the Act? Why the discrepancy on this?
Senator, Chair. I should call you Chair. Chair, as you know, if we tried to satisfy every witness that came upon us and asked us for an amendment, we'd have a 600-page bill that would totally be catastrophic, because not all witnesses agreed the same way. Our responsibility as a committee is to take the best of the comments. The one by the Privacy Commissioner, I think, on the Privacy Act was the one that was most specialized, and that's why I'm proposing it to do it. Maybe late, but it's never too late to do good.
Thank you, Senator Dawson. Senator Plitt, followed by Senator Manning and Senator Wong.
Well, I just want to take the opportunity, Senator Dawson, to express my appreciation that the government is listening to the opposition party in presenting this amendment. I'm not sure why they wouldn't have listened to the opposition at the start, and it could have been written a little differently, and we wouldn't have had to do this amendment. But Senator Dawson, thank you on behalf of the Conservative Caucus for listening, having, as the chair said, sober second thought, and seeing the proverbial light.
I hadn't seen yours dealing with the same issue. I'm sorry. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I passed it.
I agree with the question sometimes. Senator Manning, Senator Wallen, and then we'll have a question.
No, I just want to say support the amendment, and I just find it strange that the Privacy Commissioner would not be consulted on a bill of this magnitude in the beginning. I just want to state that, and it's a very important bill, and addresses. We've had several witnesses before us, and especially with the Privacy Commissioner. So just to make you wonder why he wasn't consulted in the beginning, but. I just want to make sure that, Senator Dawson, you have consulted with Senator Gold on this before you moved it, have you? Yeah. No, I wouldn't want you to be embarrassed again.
I did not talk to Senator Gold about this amendment.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think we should hear from Senator.
I would like to hear from Senator.
I'd like to hear from Senator Gold, because I wouldn't want you to be embarrassed, sir.
I did, obviously, as sponsor of the bill, talk with the government. Okay. I've been supporting this bill. I've been talking to the people that I didn't have to ask. I could have asked our witness to say that I think what I'm doing is right, but I think he trusts me and I trust him.
Senator Wallen.
I too support the amendment, but it seems, and the reason I voted against Senator Milleville-Deschênes' motion much earlier on regarding age verification methods is that requires invasion of privacy, generally of the family, of the child involved. So I find these two things a little contradictory. I think that if we want to protect privacy, we need to protect privacy. So that is my only comment. Thank you.
Question? It is moved by the Honourable Senator Dawson that Bill C-11 be amended on Clause 5, page 11, at line 36. Thank you. Is it your pleasure, Honourable Senators, to adopt the motion in amendment? Agreed. Unanimous. On division?
I don't know, whatever.
On division.
This now shall close 5.
Are we done?
So that's, sorry, that's a clause. Yeah, that's clause 5, Senator.
No, there's one more. No, you got clause 5, there's one more. 44B.
DNB. My apologies. It's the next one, you're right.
This is who?
That's, would be Manning.
Okay, colleagues, clause 5-11-44B. It's an amendment. Senator Manning, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just make sure I'm right. 44B. Okay. The Bill C-11, I'd like to move that Bill C-11 be amended in Clause 5 on page 11 by adding the following after line 44. One recognises that market forces, competition, and a growing choice of programming made available to Canadians over the Internet are contributing to achieving the objectives of the broadcasting policy set out in subsection 3, brackets 1. J, encourages all forms of competition to ensure that high quality and innovative programming is made available to Canadians using the most effective technologies available at reasonable costs. And K, ensures that regulations made under this Act are efficient and proportionate to their purpose. The purpose of my amendment is to insert language respective of consumer choice and market competitiveness. Once again, when Conrad von Frankenstein, the former chair of the CRTC, appeared before our committee, he noted that it is Canadian consumers who choose what they want to watch. Mr. von Frankenstein noted that this choice is driven by market forces and only modified when necessary by regulatory mechanisms. Tim Denton of the Internet Society of Canada chapter made a similar point when he appeared before our committee, noting that the principles of respecting user choice and recognising that competition and market forces are contributing to achieving the objectives of the Act must be principles that are incorporated in this bill. Mr. Denton stated, nowhere in this bill do we read of competition and consumer choice. The Digital Media Association brief filed with this committee stated the misconception that appears to motivate many of the Bill's C-11 amendments is that digital streaming services do not currently make substantial financial and other economic contributions to the Canadian broadcasting system. This assumption is incorrect. DIMA members already offer access to more Canadian content and contribute more revenue to artists, songwriters, and rights holders than many organisations in the regulated Canadian broadcast system do today. Excuse me. DIMA members also provide a wide variety of benefits to Canadians, artists of all sizes, including opportunities to showcase and advance their music to fellow Canadians and global audiences alike. I don't know how many senators have taken time to read and gone through the different briefs that we've had, but they provide several evidence related to the considerable input that foreign platforms are providing to invigorate the Canadian culture scene. When Wendy Moss of the Motion Picture Association Canada appeared before our committee, she pointed out that private sector companies spent more than $5 billion across Canada in 2021, now accounting for more than half of all production in Canada and 90% of the growth over the last decade. They hired, trained and provided opportunities for 200,000 of Canada's most talented creative workers. They assisted in financing new infrastructure and in supporting over 47,000 Canadian businesses in 2021 alone. What these stats demonstrate is that the current market system has served Canada and Canadians very well. I would encourage and seek your support for my amendment.
Thank you, Senator Manning, and thank you for your consistent patience in trying to make sure consumer choice is somewhat represented in this piece of legislation. We've had this discussion throughout the study and again throughout the debate. Consumer choice is nowhere to be found whatsoever, nowhere considered in this legislation. And the question I have for the official, Mr. Ripley, is why was a simple question, why was consumer choice not on the radar at all? When at the end of the day, digital platforms are all about consumers and audiences / consumers.
Thank you, Chair, for the question. We had a discussion the other day about how Canadians are reflected throughout the policy objectives of the Broadcasting Act. So it's not a question of consumers not being factored in. And again, there are certainly decisions that the CRTC takes strongly grounded in considerations related to consumers. For example, regulation of cable packages and the skinny basic package and maximum costs that can be charged to consumers. So these are questions that are regularly considered by the CRTC. The policy objectives are primary cultural policy objectives. The Broadcasting Act is fundamentally about promoting cultural expression, while recognizing that takes place in an evolving broadcasting system where technology and services continue to evolve.
But how about the importance? I understand the importance of trying to define Canadian content and promoting Canadian content. I understand all those objectives and trying to streamline the various digital platforms within some kind of regulatory framework. But the question is there any element of this bill where competitive and competition objectives are set out in this bill? Mm-hmm. And if there isn't, why not?
I would characterize it that there are policy objectives in Section 3 that we just went over that speak to making sure that Canadians have choice in terms of the programming that they have access to. There are certain provisions and objectives there that have been inserted that speak to ensuring reasonable costs and packaging of services. So again, it's from my perspective, it's not that these questions are absent, although I acknowledge they are not as explicit as Senator Manning is proposing.
So that's my next question. Will this bill make it more explicit and basically create that concern when it comes to competitive objectives?
The proposal by Senator Manning would indeed require, as the CRTC implements its regulatory policy, to consider questions of competition, and it to some extent it creates a presumption or states a presumption that market forces and competition and choice contribute to fulfilling the policy objectives of the Act. So yes, inserting these provisions, require the CRTC to consider these things through the regulatory policy.
And would this amendment in any way hinder the core objective of the bill as the government has laid out that objective?
It would require the CRTC to balance these things in also the achievement of the other policy objectives, which again are primarily cultural policy objectives. It would require them to balance these things with those other objectives.
Thank you. Senator Plett and Senator Gould.
Well, Chair, I think you've asked all the questions I had, but I'm going to just maybe even ask for a little more of an explicit answer on what I already think was your question, but mine as well. Would adopting this amendment in any way interfere with the bill's primary objective?
Thank you, Senator Plett. So the CRTC would still would still be required to seek to give effect to the policy objectives of the Broadcasting Act. That would still be its
They
core.
could do that, and it would not.
They would have to do it in a way that respects the concepts that Senator Manning is proposing here, that they take into account in doing that. And so, again, from my perspective, it's a balancing of various interests, and Senator Manning's proposal would ask them to balance these interests in giving effect to the cultural policy objectives of the Broadcasting Act.
Senator Gold.
Again, I will try to be brief, but I'm going to explain why the government opposes this amendment as a matter of policy, because it does, in the government's view, undermine and weaken and shift the balance in the role that is played by non-commercial broadcasters. There are market forces play an important role in so many aspects of our life, but there are some areas where there are market failures, or if not market failures, and the market serves us less well. That includes French content in the current environment. That includes Indigenous content or other content in languages or in cultures that are not the otherwise dominant cultures. So the government opposes this because it skews the decision-making in the CRTC in a way that compromises some of the core objectives of promoting the availability of such content as French language, Indigenous content, and the like. And that's all I have to say.
Senator Wallen.
I am a little puzzled by your concerns, Senator Gold. It says here that recognizes that market forces, competition are contributing to achieving the objectives of the broadcasting policy, encourages all forms of competition to ensure that high-quality programming is made available to Canadians. I mean, I don't understand why you think that would somehow infringe on, I don't know, existing outlets. It doesn't preclude anything.
I've stated the position of the government and the rationale for it, and I have really nothing else to add. I offer that for the consideration of the committee. I encourage us to call the question.
Okay,
I think
but
we should debate it for a while longer.
yeah, I just don't think. Well, anyway, I won't get into that.
Yes, government. Yeah, I'll weigh in on this a little bit. Government leader, we appreciate you're not a witness before the committee, and we appreciate your stating the government's position. But it's fair to ask the government, who's stating their position, some supplementary questions as politely and as respectfully as possible. And the truth of the matter is, to Senator Wallen's question, we're just putting into words into this legislation something that the bill should be already looking at according to the wording, and the CRTC, according to the officials, will be compelled because of that wording to take a balanced approach to make sure, in addition to Canadian content, to make sure that there's an alignment between new digital platforms and old-style broadcasters, and independent content providers, and competition also means some sense of consideration for consumer choices and so on and so forth. There doesn't seem to be anything in this amendment that tears away at the gut of the objective of the bill. With all due respect, government leader, we had Indigenous independent content producers come before this committee, and they unanimously all said life is great in Canada right now, unregulated, with these new platforms. They're exposing the Canadian Indigenous culture around the world, and I'm using their language where they said that we'd be feeling a lot more secure if the government just got out of their way. That's the language that 5 Indigenous witnesses used before this committee that Senator Klein had arranged to come here. So, again, I think having an amendment that is going to guarantee some competition objectives, I think is not a negative thing. I think it's a positive thing. Senator Wallen and...
Just a final, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Ripley, but I understood you to say in answer to this that it in no way restricts or limits existing operations.
my answer was that this would have the impact of requiring the CRTC to balance these concepts that Senator Manning is proposing, which market forces, competition, with the achievement of the other policy objectives, which are primarily cultural in nature.
It's balancing, yeah. Thank you.
It is moved by the Honourable Senator Manning that Bill C-11 be amended on Clause 5, page 11, at line 44. May I dispense? Is it your pleasure, Honourable Senators, to adopt the motion in amendment? No. I think the noes have a recorded vote.
L'honorable sénateur Roussakos.
Yes.
L'honorable sénatrice Clément.
Non.
L'honorable sénateur Cormier.
No.
L'honorable sénateur Dawson.
No.
The Honorable Senator Gold PC.
No.
The Honorable Senator Klein.
No.
The Honorable Senator Manning.
Yes.
L'honorable sénatrice Miville de Chêne. The Honorable Senator Umidvar.
No.
The Honorable Senator Platt.
Yes.
The Honorable Senator Quinn.
Yes.
The Honorable Senator Simons.
Yes.
The Honorable Senator Wallen.
Yes.
The Honorable Senator Wu. Yeas pour 7-7, nays contre 7-7.
Accordingly, the motion is defeated. Colleagues, shall Clause 5 as amended carry? On division, Clause 5 is carried on division. So, we are genuinely moving right along, colleagues. Complication? Yes, Senator Simon on a complication.
Yes, we're now moving to Section 7,
Section
Clause 7, rather.
8.
Yeah, I'm having a complication here too, so 1 second.
No? We just voted on 5, and there is no 6.
There is. The act is amended at the bottom.
Oh,
of
at the
page
bottom, I'm
11.
sorry, sorry, I missed the 6. Pardon me. Pardon me. No, that's still 5.
No, it's 5 at the bottom of page 11 is 6. The act here is 6. Here is 6. And there is
And it's 5. This is all still 5.
There are no amendments, so is Clause 6 carried as is on division?
So now we come to Clause 7, and this is
And now we come to Clause 7.
And I don't have amendments.
And I don't have the amendments in Clause.
We were told not to submit a written amendment, but to speak to it, to vote against. My office was in touch with you, Vincent.
Yes.
Okay.
If she wants to vote
Yes,
against,
you can, yes.
if she wants
All
to
right.
defeat it, she votes
So this
against.
is complicated, but I'm acting on the advice of the legal clerk who said not to write a text for this amendment. This is 7 sub 7, which you'll recall from, yes, bottom of page 12, lines 28, 29, 30, and 31. You'll recall that this is the section that gives new powers to the governor and council and takes powers, traditional powers, away from the CRTC as a quasi-judicial body. We've heard a great deal of testimony about this from experts Monica Auer and is it Roger or Robert Armstrong, who both former lawyers for the CRTC, who told us that this section would give extraordinarily new powers to the government to make political decisions about things. That was affirmed for us by Ian Scott when he spoke to us as the chair of the CRTC and also suggested that we remove this clause. Conversely, Mr. Ripley told us last week, 2 weeks ago, that he didn't think that there would be much effect in removing this clause. So I propose that we do not adopt clause 7 sub 7.
Thank you very much. Relieve me of my duties.
Yes.
I think moments when we agree, it's why it's minus 40 in Edmonton right now, because
I think there's a full moon out there.
definitely.
I wholeheartedly agree as well with Senator Simons and Senator Gold. Maybe we'll hit the trifecta and we get everyone to agree.
No, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you, Chair. I would like clarification from the officials. It is not clear to me at all that this adds new powers to the CRTC, despite what a witness may have said. It's a for greater certainty clause only, and I just wondered whether the officials would clear that up for us so that we can make an informed decision on this matter.
Certainly, through the chair. So this is indeed a for greater certainty clause, and when I appeared before this committee with the minister, I explained that the origins of this this clause was to articulate the subjects that could be dealt with through a policy direction by the governor and council to the CRTC, because sections like 9.1 and the 11.1 regulations are new, this was simply meant to express that it's appropriate for the governor and council to provide direction on matters falling under those regulatory powers. It was not in any way, shape, or form intended to suggest that the governor and council could apply direction vis-a-vis a particular organization or a particular specific regulatory decision of the CRTC. That would indeed be undue interference in the CRTC decision making. So that was the origin of the provision. Again, acknowledging that there is a transition that's proposed in C-11 with essentially a greater reliance on the policy direction power to provide guidance to the CRTC in lieu of petitions to cabinet under Section 28.
I would just like to stress to Senator Gold, who was not with us for all of the hearings, that we heard from
Tons.
I think half a dozen witnesses who flagged this as an issue, including, as I saw, Monica Auer of Canada's Forum for Research and Policy and Communications, from Ian Scott, the commissioner of the CRTC, from various lawyers and academics who testified before us, and who, in addition to testimony, have been writing about this. This is a not insignificant thing. I mean, I have spoken with academics, with broadcast lawyers, including Michael Geist, who have expressed to me grave concerns that this amendment gives heretofore unknown powers to the CRTC and gives to the governor and council much more political influence over broadcast regulation. The CRTC is an independent quasi-judicial body. Its decisions are publicly adjudicated. And I feel that it is important that we are very clear that we do not wish to politicize decisions that relate, because this is one of those clauses that when I first read it, I didn't understand its import. But because it speaks to sections 911 and 1112 and 10.1 and 11.1, it has a cascading effect all through the bill. And having been cautioned before that I've been speaking too long, I'm now going to stop.
No, and before I pass it over to Senator Wallen, I wholeheartedly agree with Senator Simons. We heard from many witnesses, and this is, it's not a partisan issue. We've created the CRTC to be arm's length from government, regardless of political stripes, and clearly this section is an overreach and again, consistent to Mr. Ripley's response to Senator Gold. He's been transparent and honest enough to tell us exactly the parameters and the power that this section gives the ministry, the minister, and cabinet. And there should be a divide when it comes to our broadcasting regulation. I'm still, and I know Senator Quinn, we will both have preoccupations with the fact that the government still hasn't released the regulatory guidelines that accompany this bill. Now, in addition to that, we would give this kind of authority and power to the cabinet, to the minister. I think we'd be going down a slippery slope. Senator Manning and Senator Wallen.
Is there any particular reason why we're not getting this amendment in writing? You mentioned earlier that your advice.
Because
I just wonder why.
Because this was the advice we got from the law clerk.
Yeah,
that you don't. If you're just all we had to do is say no.
We're voting on a whole section. So what Senator Simons is proposing is to defeat the section. So as a result,
So take out section 7 altogether.
7.7.
Just
Clause
sub
7.7.
Okay.
So removing it does not require writing something because you'd have an empty piece of paper.
Okay, gotcha.
Senator Wallen and then Senator Wu.
I just want to reinforce this because some of us went subsequent to the testimony that we heard repeatedly from what I would think of quite valid sources, former commissioners, lawyers who work in this field, and have litigated and written extensively about it, academics. I mean, the list is long. This wasn't just a couple of people who didn't want their online business interrupted. This was people for whom this is their livelihood, their profession, they study. And I really do think that the potential for this is most concerning and that this is the most effective way to deal, which is to just excise. Yeah, thank you.
Senator Wu.
Yes, to the extent that this clause is
Senator Wu, can you speak a little
Yes,
louder?
of course, thank you. To the extent that this clause is a for greater certainty clause, it presumably echoes something that's been already mentioned earlier in Section 7. And in Section 7, it says
You
that...
have to go to the text of the original.
Yes, that's what I'm looking at. It already says that the Governing Council has quite extraordinary powers. So are you against that as well?
The concern.
And I'll read it to you if it's helpful.
Yep.
It's Section 7. Here we are. Subject to subsection 2 and section 8, blah, 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 the Government and Council may, by order, issue to the Commission directions of general application on broad policy matters with respect to A, B, and so on and so forth.
No,
so to the extent that this is simply reiterating what 7.1a and b already say, are you also opposed to 7.1a and b?
No, because for the very good point that you just raised, it's general application. And this was the differentiation that the expert witnesses made before us. That is about broad general principles, whereas 7.7, and thank you for allowing me to clarify this, the concern about 7.7 was because it flows through all these other clauses, it would allow a specificity of direction that is not encompassed in the original language of the bill.
Well, if I could just continue, it refers to 9.1, which is also on general powers. That's what you're referring to in terms of the overreach on specificity.
9.1.1, 11.1.2,
Yes.
10.1, and 11.1.1.
Yes. They're described, 9.1 is described as general powers, and you feel the Governing Council should not have any say over those actions.
No, I'm not saying that they should have no say. What I am saying is that we heard from a significant number of expert witnesses, not lobbyists, not people pushing a political agenda, including the commissioner of the CRTC, who presumably knows his onions, who said that this section was problematic and that it would be better off if it were to be removed.
Thank you.
Shall Clause 7 carry, colleagues?
No.
So it's carried. Clause 7 is defeated. Defeated. The amendment carried. The clause is defeated. Yes.
And it is 7:30, Chair.
If colleagues will agree for a very short 4 or 5 minute break. Yep.
Forgive me again, I was confused. Could you just rephrase the question, please? Sure. Were you asking whether
I asked if Clause 7 would carry. And
okay. So please register on division.
So it carries on division.
Thank you.
Defeated.
Is defeated. The amendment carries on division. Clause is defeated. Clause 7 is defeated on division. 7.
It's 7.
It's 7. It's 7.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is 7. Yes, colleagues, we'll take a 4 minute break and we will come back.